I feel like what got me interested in the project was necessarily the idea that, gender is evolving in a way to reclaim, I feel like to reclaim queerness is in a way also reclaiming my indigenous identity. I feel like throughout the shoot, what was fun and interesting was being able to sort of explore different identities, different groups, and different wonders of the world in a way that puts the POC in a pedestal that hasn't been put before necessarily. They're no longer like the servant or the one in suffering, but they're actually enjoying that environment. They're like having like a lux moment in that environment. Having control over my identity and how I present it gives me ownership and like an edge over people who might not have the ability to do so or don't need to do it due to their privilege. So my great great grandfather was Antonio Saldaña. He died in 1920. He was believed to be poisoned/assassinated by the U.S. Food Corp. He was the last indigenous king of Costa Rica. He was a huge advocate for preserving indigenous reserves and maintaining them intact. When the U.S. Food Corporation came into Latin America, they wanted to begin to develop more in indigenous areas because that was the least developed areas where they could just set up plantations. I feel like in the shoot, the tropical forest is like, I grew up in a forest. I grew up in the tropics. I lived in a rainforest. And then the idea of like the shaman was sort of how I envisioned the last dire moments of my great-grandfather. For the Egypt look, in my head, I kept thinking about how a lot of times it's like photographers who go to Africa and take a photo of some random person who they found to be out of the norm to what they're used to, in a way extremely beautiful. And then like profit out of that, but also create a whole different narrative of who they actually are. I feel like that's kind of what I was thinking, over exaggerating what it is to be discovered if I was to be discovered there. Would I be discovered as like a new being just by having ornaments and like having prosthetics on me? Like would I be considered something else outside of the norm? Would I become grandiose or would I be considered a freak? It's not about beauty at all. I try to play with things that have impacted me personally or things that I've noticed around the community. For example, like racism and blackface. I've encountered many people in my life who have done it. I've come across it very, very often. For me to recreate a look where I'm doing the foundation as white around my face, but doing my face as black is inversing kind of like the blackface idea of like who's wearing it. Is it actually a white person with blackface or is it a black person with blackface? It is easy to something that can be considered racist, like blackface. If you claim to be part of the community and you do something like that, you should already know firsthand that it's wrong for you to do that. If you call yourself an advocate of the community, you should advocate not only for yourself, but everyone else that is part of that community.